A very good evening to everybody watching. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of The Agenda. My name is Toivo Njebela. Tonight on the platform, we are joined by Nrupesh Soni. He is a tech expert, currently also serving as CEO of Facilitate Namibia, and he is here to help us unpack the topic of the week, that is the announcement by CRAN, the regulator, the communications regulator, about Starlink, which had applied for to enter the Namibian market, and that application was rejected, and that decision has divided opinions. Nrupesh, thank you very much for making time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Your take on that subject, first and foremost.
Look, it is a very, I won't say controversial, but it's a sensitive subject because I think a lot of times it's about what we want, what we need. So yes, a lot of people want Starlink. Whether we need Starlink, yes, it depends on which part of Namibia you ask a person about it. But I think at the end of the day, the rejection was because of regulatory, the regulatory, outlines, whether it followed the regulations or not. And that is where I would say, yes, if it didn't follow the regulations, why would you allow a company and open that door for other companies to come in?
Yeah, the precedent that will be set by doing that. Just for somebody who, you are a tech guy, you are a fanatic of technology and all these kind of things. Ordinarily, what does Starlink offer compared to what we have in the market at the moment?
Now, look, Starlink offers very high-speed internet at relatively low costs. It's not cheaper than what we have in Namibia, but at the same time, it offers services of using internet anywhere you are. You can be in the middle of Damaraland, you can be on Skeleton Coast, you will have internet. So it does offer convenience of having internet everywhere. That's something Namibia still lacks. We have VSAT, satellite options. We have a few new companies coming, just somebody who just announced as well, OneWeb. But the cost is always going to be a factor because VSAT traditionally has been very expensive and it's not very portable. So what Starlink offers is a portable internet connectivity anywhere you go, which is something which will help Namibia, yes.
I saw in the announcement this week, the minister, she sat alongside the CRAN board chairperson, and the minister ventured into the costs of Starlink a little bit, saying it's expensive and all that. But that shouldn't be up to her or anyone else to decide. People just want options.
Absolutely. Look, I don't think regulatory authority should say what you sell it for. That's not their decision to make. But if you compare OneWeb, which is one of the big Starlink competitors in Africa, they have a local partner, Echo, and they got in OneWeb, they got the license, they went through the procedure, and they had to pay, I think, over $500,000, $1 million to get their license. And that's the cost every year they'll have to pay. So now as a company like that, obviously they have to recover that funds before they even start making profit. And there are other aspects to it. So they have to make a few $1 million to kind of break even and start making some money. So as a company who's gone through that process and is still bringing in something like Starlink, you see what it actually costs. Their packages are expensive for most Namibians to afford, but that's because of what they paid for, right? Now, if Starlink comes in for free and they don't pay any of those costs, and then you still have to import the devices, they don't have a local partner to import the devices. Starlink devices start from 10,000, 15,000 on average, and they go up. That's just the device cost. And then the subscription cost might be cheap, but I don't think most people in rural areas where we are looking at the need of Starlink are going to be able to afford it. Only people who will afford it is lodges, farmers, some of them, yes. But it's not going to be that game changer that everyone makes it out to be. And I feel a lot of that aspects have not been discussed, like the cost factor, the importing costs. We don't even know if a Starlink device comes in, how much is Namra charging us? Then we need CRAN and they need device certification, because even a phone you cannot bring in without certification, right? Even a router you cannot bring in. So who's going to do all of that? So we haven't even looked at those costs.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about lodges and farms. You are also very active in the hospitality space there. You do a lot of things there. What is the situation like at the moment? I've gone to establishments where once you arrive there, you have to essentially just put away your phone because there's simply no connectivity.
Yes.
And I'm a local guy, and I'm thinking, if I'm a German guy, or I'm coming from Bulgaria or whatever, and we are going to this unknown destination in Africa with all the perceptions of Africa, and then you text people maybe at the airport and say, I've landed safely in Namibia, and or we are now jumping into the 4x4s to go into Damaraland or whatever, and off you can't be reached anymore. That must be distressing for families. So how is the situation like on the ground?
I don't think anyone has really complained. People come here to get away from the realities of the world, so they don't really want to be always in contact. But there's a whole demographic which lives on influencing others on Instagram and social media, and they love to have internet everywhere they go. But to be honest, if you buy an MTC SIM card or any SIM card in Namibia, MTC Telecom, even Paratus in main towns, I don't think there's ever been like you're completely lost. Yes, if you go to remote rural areas, there are connectivity issues. But the way you're saying, once you leave the airport, there is no. But it's, I think, from airport up to Etosha, you'll always have network. You will have internet. To most places, you will have internet. Sossus Play, if you go in, yes, there's no internet. But I mean, of course, that's a small section. So it's not that bad. I mean, if you look at the connectivity where population is, if you're local, there's enough connectivity. And this is something I keep emphasizing is, we don't have a connectivity issue as much as we have a digital literacy issue in Namibia, if you look at locals. If you look at tourism, yes, a bit more connectivity will help. But would you rather have people on Starlink always online when they're trying to enjoy Sossus Play or Fish River Canyon? Or would you rather have the nature and beauty take priority in those instances?
Absolutely.
And most lodges have certain amount of internet where you can at least WhatsApp. They might not have high-speed internet to stream Netflix, but there is enough internet around.
On farms, because the farmers seem to be particularly upset about the decision by CRAN.
Yes, and rightly so, because that is where I mentioned earlier that there is a demographic that needs Starlink. But what I don't understand is them using the schools and medical, and they are using other people's needs as an excuse, instead of saying, you know what, as farmers, we need this. As anti-poaching, we need this. But problem is with anti-poaching, you also have poachers who might bring in Starlink equipment. And now it becomes a bigger problem because you're allowing poachers to be always connected. Where does that stop? Who does that control? Who controls that? And so there's always two sides to it. So I'm like, yes, there's a need for it. But if you are a farmer who can afford VSAT or OneWeb or any other connectivity, then all you're looking for is a cheaper option. That's all. And that's, again, doesn't justify breaking all the regulations just to get something cheaper. Especially like in 3-4 months, third quarter of this year, Amazon is launching their services and it will come to Namibia as well. And I feel that should take priority, just following the regulations. I mean, what's the name? Starlink had an opportunity to partner with Paratus and other companies like they've done in some other African countries. Partner up with a local company, let them be your billing partner, your importer. Then at least there's somebody responsible, right? Then they can manage which Starlink devices are in the country. So all the illegal activities can be controlled by that.
It's a good point. One of the issues that have been raised is the security, national security element. How does Starlink work in so much that there are those concerns? How is it different from your MTCs and practices insofar as issues related to public security are concerned?
If you look at bigger countries, I'll give you an example of India, for example. We just recently allowed Starlink after a lot of negotiations and rules in place. Their demand or their need was they should have an off switch. any country should be able to have an off switch in case there's a cyber terrorism attack, or anything, a massive data leak, or whatever it is. There needs to be some kind of oversight on it. I'm not saying control, but that's where if you have critical data, sensitive data being used on a network that's not local, it becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah.
But this is where digital literacy comes in, because we have ministers and government officials using Gmail and Yahoo.
Yeah.
And Namibia is too small to notice those things. It'll be difficult to anyway show the impact of something like this, because we've never had an incident, or we'll probably never have something where, or until something happens where a minister's private data is leaked because it was on Gmail, things might change. But I think that's where the whole digital infrastructure is not there yet. So having Starlink won't really impact that, but it'll just make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The argument by some has been that now we must protect our local entities, and of course the providers of those services are your MTCs and Telecom already are state-owned. Is it an informed position to say just as a basis we must deny this entity to come in just to protect these ones? Because from a consumer point of view, you just want variety and to choose from, and it might even drive the prices down.
So that I agree. Like it shouldn't be based on because MTC and Telecom are not providing, or they're losing money from it. The argument I'll make is it's not about them. It's about the other smaller companies who apply for these licenses. Like I said, OneWeb, they follow the regulations. They apply. They have to go through it for a year to get there. They pay a lot of money, and they follow all the due diligence. And now somebody comes in. It's their money I'm looking at. A Namibian company who might apply properly with the right channels and regulations, it's their money you're taking away, not necessarily MTC and Telecom. This might be a wake-up call for them, but they need to see how to improve connectivity or coverage, how to bring in new technology. But I don't think that should be considered as part of decision that you're making, you protecting MTC and Telecom, which we will never know if what was decided in terms of why it was rejected. But it's the same as NBC. If somebody comes in and says, you know what, we're going to have a national TV channel, but it's not based in Namibia. And we're not going to follow regulations. We're not going to pay fees, and we can swear on TV because we are not based in Namibia. Then who controls that? You see what I mean? Now, what's to say that if Starlink comes in and they just start giving information about any country, Namibia, anything to the subscribers that is negative to the growth of the country, who controls that? At least CRAN has regulations on what can be broadcast, right? So that also falls under the cyber regulations. So I feel a lot of that has not even been discussed or addressed. It's like me running a radio station from my house without a license. If you're allowing Starlink, then we should allow that, right?
I mean, it's a good example. During the apartheid time, SWAPO had I think it was called Voice of Namibia or something like that. It was a radio station owned by SWAPO, run by SWAPO people in exile about Namibia. And the government here hated the content on that radio station, but because it's remote, they couldn't do anything about it.
And that's exactly it, isn't it? You have regulations and rules in place to control these things, because at the end of the day, it's the sovereignty of a country that's at stake. And many people ask, like, why are other African countries allowing, like Zimbabwe and them? So, well, look at the political structure. I mean, we are one of the best democracies in Africa, so we have rules of law, we have a lot of things in place for that reason. And the moment you start not following that, where does that lead to? And every person who is saying they want Starlink, if you ask them about their own sector, like farmers, if you say, okay, you are a meat farmer with the cows, but what if people don't follow meat co regulations or the red line regulations? Then you don't like it. Then you want people to follow regulations. So why in your field you want people to follow regulations, but when you want something, it's fine, you can see the other way.
It's true. So, so technically speaking, Nrupesh, a company like MTC, if something was detected in terms of how they disseminate, I don't know, how they help disseminate information, because we know, for example, in countries like Uganda, you had this very undemocratic thing that they do around elections. They switch off internet
Yes.
in the entire country. But let's assume that that was being done not for elections, but for something else that is really maybe there's a national security threat in that moment in the country. So technically, can we switch off?
We can find them.
Yeah,
You see, the thing is,
Yeah.
if MTC sends SMSs about politics, or if MTC sends a message saying vote for ABC, they can be fined. There's rules in place, right?
Yeah.
But if an entity that's not in Namibia, there's no Namibian stakeholders, if they start sending messages pro something, an agenda,
Yeah.
how do you manage that? How
Yeah.
do you even find them? How do you stop them?
Yeah.
You cannot.
But can you switch them
No,
off? I mean the local ones.
Local ones you can, because there are, you see, you take away the license.
Yeah.
You close the spectrum of, there's a lot of ways you can do it.
Yeah.
You have somebody responsible on the ground
Yeah.
doing that, right? I mean, as a news company, I mean, your newspapers, if they write something, you have to retract it, right?
Yeah.
How do you hold somebody overseas accountable for that?
Yeah.
If they are in direct contact with, in a position of influence over people using their service.
Yeah. It's true. So this entity that they are calling Starlink Internet Services Namibia. So this Namibia element is just to sweeten the deal, but technically there's really nothing Namibian about it.
I haven't looked into BPA documents yet. I don't know if you guys have, but they said it was not Namibian ownership. So I don't know if that entity actually exists or if it's registered, who owns it. Because I wouldn't even know how you would get away with like owning a company which says Namibia on it without local shareholders. So it's something to look into. But I wouldn't know. I mean, for that, it's like, how would the legal recourse be if something happens? That's look at, even despite so many regulations coming in with SIM registration and other things, not a lot has been able to be done.
Yeah.
So it's something, there are lots of challenges there that we need to look at before we even open up doors to further issues.
Yeah. One of the contentious issues, Nrupesh, is for me personally, is the ownership demands that somehow all ICT companies coming to Namibia must give up 51%, essentially the entire control of their entity, to Namibians. Of course, there's an element of discretion on the part of the minister to say, look, we can make it 30, we can make it 20 or whatever. But the fact that 51% is even on paper, that alone for me scares me. I think it's the most unreasonable provision ever. I understand the sovereignty issues. You want to make sure that Namibians are really somehow in control. But if you put the regulations in place that you were talking about here, the technical things are in place, then I think our sovereignty is still safe.
Yeah, so if the technical, so for me, I'm looking at the CRAN side, okay, which is the technical regulations, like they would control radio frequency or an FM channel or anything. That is one side of the regulation, which I would say they must adhere to. But if you look at the 51%, I think that's been very selective in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
You can see tourism sector, to most of the sectors, you'll find companies who don't follow that rule.
Yeah.
So I feel that shouldn't be the reason, but if you don't have a local, so if a person is not staying in Namibia, if you register a company as a fully foreign shareholder, even with, like I said, they've registered a Namibian company, what classifies as a Namibian stakeholder? Again, firstly, is it citizens? What classifies that? And then are they the ones who are accountable for anything that goes wrong? If the rules are not followed and there's a fine of $5 million, who pays that? You see, So that side of it, I mean, I feel like a lot of sectors are not following that rules.
Yeah.
For me, the one thing I was looking at was taxation or the money leaving the country. Like we have a problem in tourism where everybody who uses booking.com, there's 18% commission that just goes out of the continent, not even country. So every booking coming into Namibia, 18% goes to other continents, America, Europe. So here, almost 100% is going out, right?
Yeah.
There's no taxation, there's no local benefits, there's no local jobs.
Yeah.
There's absolutely zero benefit for Namibia except good connectivity for some.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Oh man, yeah, it's the way you put it. It's very scary.
Yes, we consume Netflix, and many people say, "Yeah, but we're paying for Netflix."
Yeah.
But that's consuming content. That's just entertainment. That's we know willingly we're giving money. But now, literally, you are sending money out of the country to an entity that's not really paying tax or anything.
Yeah. So how is that different from this good that you mentioned, Netflix? Because Netflix operates in the same way somehow. If I go to multi-choice, I pay for my DSTV.
Yes.
For Netflix, I do that, but I suppose Netflix is also almost like your Twitters and whatever, which are not here.
It's everywhere. Google, Microsoft, we pay every country.
Yeah.
We pay every company. Online, whatever you pay, it's going to them, right?
Yeah.
But now, here, the difference is we are giving them content.
Yeah.
We are not consuming content.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are sending our data out, a lot of things are going out, and we're putting them in a position where they can influence a lot. And I feel that apart from just that mentality, everyone is like, no, the word Starlink, we want Starlink.
Yeah.
If you look at the pricing, it's not that cheap.
Yeah.
If you look at the packages and pricing, even in Botswana, it is just not going to be that affordable that people think it is. And yes, everybody has a right to have a choice, but it should be by a company who, if you are in the country and you're applying for a regulatory license, you should be able to manage that.
Yeah.
With Netflix, I'm pretty sure many countries, when there is an objectionable content on Netflix, you can file a complaint because the threat to Netflix is you might block Netflix in the country. Because there's that fear.
Yeah.
So that's why they have certain shows only in certain countries.
Yeah.
Because they know if they show something in a country where it's offensive, they will be blocked.
Yeah.
So they have to still follow those rules, even if they're virtual. With Starlink, the way it's run, I don't think they like following rules.
Yeah, it's true. I remember when the war in Ukraine broke out. I just can't remember the exact phrases now, but I remember Elon Musk talking a lot about, you see, we can assist you with whatever, or we can take away. There were remarks to that effect, which now gives me, in hindsight, the fear that maybe the sovereignty element of Starlink in that country is not the way we are demanding here. So they can empower your enemy, they can or take away your thing, and then you can't communicate among yourselves as the enemy is approaching.
So the thing is that Starlink has been proactively doing that. Suddenly they decide, no, we're not going to provide you. They take it away.
No.
Oh no, we think you should have it. Here you go.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be that with one person or two people, that decision should not be there for a country's future or whatever is happening there.
Yeah.
And I feel that's where that becomes a lot more uncertain or risky, in the sense that you don't want to be in a position where somebody else has a leverage on how your country is connected to the internet.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the countries they operate, especially in Africa, and I won't compare it with Europe and all, because in Europe they have to follow the European regulations. In Africa, it's more like a need because they don't have any other alternative infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
So Zimbabwe, for example, they don't have that vast coverage of perhaps MTC has here. MTC has coverage to most population. I won't say most of the country, but that's where they see the need. Here we're looking at a need of 2-3% people, 5% people, while the other 95% who have connectivity, even if it's slow for a certain standard, I don't think that's an excuse to not have digital literacy and other things in place. And we're not even enough talking about that part of it to say, okay, there are schools who have internet, what are we doing with them? But no, we're easy to say these are the schools who don't have internet, we need Starlink for them.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we go for a very short break and return with Nrupesh Soni. We are still talking to Nrupesh Soni. He's a tech expert, and we're discussing Starlink primarily, their application having been rejected by CRAN this week. You spoke about OneWeb. Is it OneWeb that you spoke about? Well, what entity is that? I've never heard of it before. So
OneWeb, even if you look on Google, OneWeb has actually partnered with, I think it's Paratus in some African countries. They're a big competition to Starlink in Africa.
Okay.
They provide similar services, similar rates. Some of them is actually better. And they just got the license in Namibia working with a local company. I think it's Echo. And just the cost of actually getting the license and everything. Now their new packages or their packages are a bit high because it's an offering for which, I mean, the only way they'll make money if its businesses buy in to break even that cost.
Yeah.
And this is what I meant by regulation. Like if Amazon is coming in the next few months, they'll definitely partner with a local company to get through, and then they should be fine. And I think that's where Starlink went wrong, is by coming in themselves. Because Namibia is different than other African countries. We have a lot more policies and regulations in place. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it's something to have in a country to make sure that there's no exploitation. And then opening doors for companies just to come in and then do what they want.
Yeah. How do you think Starlink, from a taxation point of view, how would you envisage if that model would be taxed when you don't have infrastructure here, even your processing of, I don't know how it works.
So it's like Netflix. You go online, you pay for it, and you import the router. And that's it. Then your account is linked to it. And if you don't pay, it's disconnected. Or if you pay, so it's just that. So, I mean, you're importing a router, and that's about it.
Yeah, because some people will say, look, from a taxman point of view, having Starlink here would also, despite all the other problems, at least they'll be paying taxes. But I don't know if it's satellite and they probably don't even have proper office here. Maybe they have a small satellite office, no pun intended. Just how do you tax a company that is not even properly?
I think that would have been part of that regulation or discussion, because just think about it this way. If MTC was to say, okay, buy a mobile credit, but if you pay on this account, which is our Dubai account, you get it cheaper because now they don't have to pay tax on it. Every time you buy data, you pay VAT, right?
Yes.
You see that some money is so that goes to the government. So with Starlink and them, when you're buying data, or you're paying a subscription fee for internet, money is staying in. It's not even going through Namibian banks. It's going online straight. And that's something also, I'm assuming if you start allowing a company to do that, what's to stop from other companies using the same approach to say, pay on this account and you get more data.
There was an issue because CRAN, in their statement, they said there were 6 criteria on which they were judging this entity, and they only met 50% of those. 3 criteria were met, 3 were not met. One of those that were not met is the company's compliance history, saying that Starlink contravened the Communications Act by operating a network and offering telecommunication services here without a valid license. I remember there was some scandal. Some people were found with Starlink on their farms or whatever.
Yes.
How do you think that played out against them?
So I do know, I think it was a year, over the last 2 years, there are a lot of confiscated units, and it was never really made public where I don't think any entity came out and said we confiscated it,
Yeah.
from whom or anything. But I do know from a few people that it happened.
Yeah.
So obviously they knew where it was being used,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how they came about.
Yeah.
I don't think it might be Starlink telling them, because if you tell an entity, look, it's like Netflix, right? If you say, look, if you're here illegally, you might not get a license in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they must have told them where it is, where they are being operated. And I feel it's also not right if they did tell CRAN where the units were, and now you reject the license.
Yeah.
What's to say they might not start operating illegally again, but this time Starlink won't help you? Then what?
Yeah.
I don't know if they've thought about it, but it's
Yeah.
something to say, okay, what if it restarts? Obviously, then it again impacts the future prospects.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's one of those things. I know they've allowed for years to have people use Starlink.
Yeah. Yeah. It was that was just a very
But they found Starlink in most remote places. Obviously, they knew where it was.
Yeah. I mean, and we can't even rule out that there's still pockets of people across the country using those devices, because I mean, for satellite, I don't think it's even easy to detect Yeah.
I mean, like, it would be interesting to know how they found it. For personally, I was just curious. But I feel if Starlink complied with that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's done. They didn't know, or whatever happened. I mean, behind the scenes. If that is a criteria, then what is the timeline of punishment?
Yeah.
It's okay. You didn't comply for 2 years. For another 2 years, you might not qualify.
Yeah.
But you can't hold it lifelong for that, right? You can't say 10 years later. Yeah, but 10 years ago, you allowed a few devices to be used.
Exactly.
You can't use that as an excuse.
Yeah. Just for the interest of those that are watching, Nrupesh, and I know that I'm putting you on the spot now, but is there absolutely any company at all, a foreign ICT company operating in Namibia that you know of, that is 51% owned by Namibians, but it's a foreign entity?
I wouldn't. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't know which company is owned by whom.
Yeah.
And what classifies an ICT company? When we're talking about ICT, what are we talking about? For me, is it the BIPA registration? Will you not allow BIPA registration if it's less than 51%? Because that's not happening.
Yeah.
BIPA allows anyone to register a company.
Yeah.
We have non-profits with all board members being foreign, or more than half being foreigners, or here on a temporary work permit, but they're still board members and directors of companies. So I feel that also, legally, how would you see what classifies as an ICT company? Is it a company that then has to apply for a CRAN license? So any company applying for a CRAN license might need a 51% ownership, but not a company in general. So those things are still unclear. I haven't heard back. I've asked a few questions about that to say, okay, I know, for example, tourism, if it's NTB registration, you need to have a certain criteria.
Yeah.
So you might have a CC that's fully foreign owned, but to get an NTB license, you might need. So it might be the same with CRAN, that it's CRAN regulations that a company needing license needs to be 51%, not a Namibian company regulation.
Do you think across all sectors, if any, because I've declared my position, and I think it's a ridiculous requirement, to have built your company ground up and then you're just told to enter a small market, a very, very small market. Because I also think, honestly, I mean, I love my country, I'm very patriotic as it can be, but I think that a lot of times we overestimate our importance. We are a very, very, very small market. What is so unique about this country that would force anyone in the right state of mind to give up ownership of their company?
So there's two things, right? One is giving up ownership. One is starting a local entity while you still have your main ownership. So if I had a big French company and I'm starting an office in Namibia, it would be that office, that subsidiary, who would structure a local partnership. Nothing impacting the main company. But so I feel there are many ways companies structure it. They open they open a PTY limited where you can have companies owning shares and things. And I mean, look, it's such a complex area because we have issues in tourism where we allow foreign companies to operate, but we as Namibian companies cannot even take tour guides to neighboring countries. We have a lot of these different sectors where companies are operating fully foreign owned. And a lot of times the law is kind of very selective in those cases where if I say I've been here 16 years and that's okay, I came here, I started as CC years ago, I stood in line at Ministry of Trade, got my CC, got my documents. As a permanent resident, I still feel like, yeah, if I start a big company, I would rather have a local involvement just because you can do more. When you go into big contracts with companies, I feel there's a lot more element of, I think, security to say, okay, yeah, there's somebody responsible if something goes wrong. And I feel that's always a good thing to have. Tax-wise, doesn't matter as long as the company is registered here and they pay tax. It's a whole other discussion. But to have 51% local ownership, I feel that's also unfair to a lot of investors who would reconsider their investment if you're forcing them.
Yeah.
But if you're saying, as an IT company, you can be 100% owner, that's fine. But if you want government contracts, you need to have a certain criteria because every country does that. You want defense contracts, you need to have certain criteria. If you want big government contracts, you need. So let's make that clear to say, okay, if you want to come into Namibia, you can operate yourself. But if you want to do more and grow bigger and do something that might take away from local companies, then you need to have certain criteria.
Ideally, I mean, in a company like Starlink, it's such a huge global conglomerate. And even if you were just to say 25%, you halve that requirement and say, look, locals can have 25%. Because the minister explained on TV this week that how you dispose of that shareholding, that local shareholding, is entirely up to you, whether you donate or you sell or whatever. But selling, of course, donating, nobody in their right state of mind would do that. But so selling is the likely, there has to be a commercial transaction there. But who can even afford 25% in an entity?
Starlink is not a very global conglomerate. It's more like operates from a certain place. And they provide services everywhere without having local partnerships.
But the value of that entity.
But what we are saying is we're not asking for value of that entity. What we're saying is if you look at, and I think this has also not been made very clear, from my understanding is, and this is the way Starlink operates in some other markets, you have a billing partner. So let's say, for example, Paratus. So Paratus becomes the billing partner. So all the taxation and stuff goes through Paratus, and then they are the agency. I mean, that's open, right? Like you can be agency for any company of the world, and you are an agent for them. So me as a Starlink agent, I'm bringing in Starlink equipment. I'm importing them, distributing them. I'm providing the billing, the tax, the money side, finance side of it. And it will be a little bit more because I'm paying tax on that money I'm getting, right? And then I'm paying to Starlink. So I still pay Starlink what they need or what they want. I'm just adding on so that I can pay the tax. And Starlink doesn't even want to do that. And I feel if you start looking at doing that, and that's what OneWeb and others are doing. They're billing partners, local partners, but the company isn't given any shares. The company is not even registering in Namibia. They're just choosing a local partner. They could easily have done that because they've done that in other countries. So why not even that?
No, you are right. Look, when I saw a BBC report this week about the Starlink application having been rejected, that article was very, very damaging as far as I'm concerned. If I was reading that, and I don't know this country, I'm sitting somewhere in Brussels or whatever, I would have thought that Namibia is such a, I don't know, because the BBC article says the application was rejected because Starlink did not meet the 51%. that is very scary to read.
That's such a common problem here, and it's frustrating all the time because a lot of times you will see articles or incidences like these which damage Namibia. It's because we only release half the information.
Yeah, yeah.
So now to have a gazette that says 51% clearly doesn't explain why it was declined. It just says decline and that 51%. People assumed that it was 51%.
Yeah.
Only a few days later, after all the articles came in, they said no, there were 6 points and everything. Why not do it together so that whoever sees it gets a full picture?
Yes.
And we do that for every event, every incident.
Yeah.
We have half the information, then there's a damaging part, and then we have a response to that, rather than coming up with it saying like, this is what happened, here is our press release.
Exactly. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because that was bad. Because for me, I know the full story, especially after the explanation by the minister and the board chairperson. And I only stumbled upon that BBC article maybe a day later, but obviously you could tell it was written before the press conference was held. And they do not even include the aspect of discretion to say, look, it's not very strict. It's not like take it or leave it situation. It's really, that is a requirement, but government is flexible to say, look, you can, whatever. That was not there.
They picked it up from our newspapers, right? They picked it up from us to say, okay, we were too quick to write about it.
Yeah.
Because we only had that info it was declined and 51%. We didn't have any other answers. So all Namibian newspapers wrote it.
Yeah.
BBC and others picked it up, and they continued the narrative.
Yeah.
And I feel, we keep doing that. We don't have the full answer every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the final question on Starlink itself is really just about, look, if a country demands 51%, no matter how ridiculous that sounds, to come and offer zero equities, that for me was self-defeating. Couldn't they have said at least maybe 10%, we start with 5% for now, or whatever?
Yeah, so I think it's the way the Namibian company or the Namibian entity was structured. That kind of threw everyone off. Because if you have an entity called Starlink Namibia, it has nothing to do with the whole Starlink group, right? It can start with zero money. But it all it needs to do is saying, okay, we have a local partner who is some percentage or something. But when it's zero, it stands out. Then it just makes it like, okay, you don't care about the company regulations. It's just that. But I feel, there were a lot of other things that happened behind the scenes. I don't think it's the 0 or 51% issue. But I feel there are other things in place that might have impacted. But I'm reading that they are actually kind of going to petition against, or what do you call, appeal against it. So we'll see how that goes, and see if something changes in that. Or, I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm supplying something, let's look at vehicles, Mahindra or Chinese company. They're supplying the vehicles, you have local agents, you have local showrooms. If you follow that process, I mean, people will still get what they want. And you still follow regulations. Why do you need to be here and then say, no, pay us offline, pay us in another country? But we here. And I feel that there's a lot of unknowns there.
But they would have to do, because I don't see, if the appeal doesn't address decisively the issue of national security, I don't think any amount of local equities or anything else would even change that, because I don't think Namibia will budge on that. There has to be some guarantees in that space.
You can't. When your own national provider, telecom provider, has leaked data on 800,000 Namibians, I mean, that's half the adult population data was leaked in the telecom hack. And I feel like if we don't even have regulations to prevent that from happening again, we don't have a cybersecurity act yet. So how do you kind of govern that? You cannot. Because we don't have an act to prevent that from happening. Even if Starlink comes in, we don't have a cybersecurity act.
That law, where is it lately? It was some sort of draft or bill.
So it's been draft. The access to information is on, but nobody has been able to use it successfully. Then we have the Data Protection Act. And so all of these need to come together, have a proper framework to then hold people accountable, companies accountable for incidences that might happen. But until then, I mean, we're not doing enough on that side. So we can't use that as an excuse to say there's a national security risk because we don't have a way to punish them, even the local companies.
Speaking of that, there was this drive by the Minister of Information and that MTC and TN Mobile must have all their subscribers, their SIM card holders registered. And there were deadlines, and some people had their things disconnected because they did not register by the time of the deadline. And we were told it's partly or mostly to curb things like that, cyber crimes and scamming of people, whatever. Those things continue to happen today.
Yes, and while it was a good start or good intention, there was no company taking ownership of it, no entity, not company, but no state-owned enterprise or a ministry saying, you know what, here is a way to actually file a complaint, and immediately we can then force companies to take action. So what happens now is, yes, companies are sitting with data, but the law prevents them, the regulation prevents them from actually giving that data to anyone.
Yeah.
Unless it comes through the police.
Yeah.
And that is just not happening because it's too late by the time, because cops will say, yeah, but it's not that serious. It's just a phone that was stolen. So even with scams, the amount of time it actually takes to find out who it was, and even if you find out, to then prove, because we don't have the policies in place, we don't have the Cybercrime Act yet.
Yeah.
Because if we have the act, we can actually sue someone based on the information you have about the person.
Yeah.
But you can't do that. So, and again, SIM card registration was also part of the leak. So Telecom also leaked that data. So for me, it was just that we can have all of these, but if you don't have something, that fear factor to say, okay, you'll be punished if this happens. Start punishing telecom companies. For every scam that's proven, charge them millions. Because they are the ones not, taking care and making sure it doesn't happen. Then there is a way to hold them accountable. But if you don't do that, it won't change.
Whose SIM cards do you think are being used? Because mine is in my name, is recorded at MTC, whatever. So whose cards, when people say, oh, I lost my e-wallet or whatever, or I e-wallet my money to some number, whose numbers are those?
They've used somebody's card to get it. Unfortunately, they might even be able to use a dead person's card. ID. Who is checking the smaller shops? Who is checking if all the due diligence and process was followed? Nobody is.
Because SIM cards are also, I don't know, lately I haven't bought one in a long time, but they were sold just everywhere.
So they're sold everywhere. Like, who is making sure that the tourists are taking the SIM cards back? What if a tourist comes and buys a SIM card? Now their phone is stolen, or the SIM card is gone. They're not going to file a complaint.
Because they're leaving.
They're leaving. Then that SIM card can be misused and nobody knows. I mean, they know who it was, but that person is no longer even in the country or responsible for it. So there are lots of ways it is happening.
Wow, man, it's crazy. So the cyber security bill, what does it, in its current state of, I know it's still in the works, but what does it entail generally?
No, it'll prevent, or it'll at least address all of these incidences of money being stolen, fake, these calls, scamming older people for the money, or everyone. They're just trying their luck with everyone. And there'll be repercussions, hopefully, for the companies who enable this and not actually take actions against it. Because without that, nothing will change. If you don't start punishing the companies who do that. It's like this. If I swear on radio, whose responsibility is it? Radio, right?
Yes, the radio station.
So why are we not holding those companies accountable when it comes to stealing money? Same with banks are responsible. Banks have to take responsibility for things that happen to a certain extent because they have regulations. And I feel with internet and telecom companies, we're just not doing enough to manage that.
Because the banks, they are also part of the problem. They just shrug their shoulders every time there's an incident. They try very hard to pin it on the user, to say, oh, you must have in a way leaked your PIN to someone, and person says no, that did not happen, and the bank just refuses to take responsibility.
Or it might be they're blaming the telecom companies who are then, because I get a fake call or a scam call on my phone, So that's where it starts, right? Most of the scams happen because of a phone call or somebody messaging you or convincing you. So that channel is already not being addressed. So if after that, the bank will easily blame the user, because bank cannot blame the telecom operator. The bank will say, yeah, you did this.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it is because you got a call. A lot of times you got a call or a message, or somebody asks you to click something. So I'm not defending the banks. I'm just saying that needs to be that ecosystem where, and the cybercrime law can hopefully address that. It's okay. You all come together and fight that.
Absolutely. Maybe in the closing minutes, Rupesh, let's talk about the expansion of network by the likes of, because there are still corners in our country, a lot of them actually, where you wouldn't even open your WhatsApp message. It's just data doesn't reach there, MTC, TN Mobile, or whoever. How much does that take away from the people? Because people really, sometimes there are situations of life and death. You would just have to send that message. If it goes through, you are saving a life. But still, we have a situation where it wouldn't go through.
That's just coverage, right? We're a big country, so it becomes difficult to have coverage everywhere. And Starlink won't solve that, because you will have to have a Starlink device with you to send that call. Starlink doesn't mean that everybody within a kilometer. It's like a router. How far does a router internet go? A room, 2 rooms, 3 rooms? So it's just that. So it's not competing with MTC. It's not putting up a tower, or it's not giving you that wide connectivity. It is giving you concentrated connectivity in a certain space. So even a farmer, he's not going to have his whole farm connected. He has to drive around with his bakkie with the Starlink device to get connection where he wants. So that also is a misconception, right? Because we think, okay, Namibia is big. You need 1 million Starlink devices to connect the whole country. So it's more like that, more to say, yes, telecom connectivity needs to be improved, and digital literacy needs to happen. Like that, it needs to level up for people to use what they have to do more productive work. You can't have a kid with 3G just wasting time on TikTok, because that 3G, he needs to be actually using it for more productivity. And we're not doing that. We're not teaching all that. And WhatsApp is a social media. It's a waste of time a lot of times, because you're not really learning or working. People do business on it, but not a lot. Most of them, it's socializing. So I feel what we have is not being utilized enough to do more. We have, from this few thousand schools that we have, how many are near a tower? If you're not utilizing that, Starlink won't help. So that needs to be looked at first before we use schooling as an excuse. Or a clinic which is near. So 3G, 4G works for most things. If you look at countries like India, China, they have 4G now. Recently they got 5G. So all these years and decades, they were still operating on slow internet. We can't use that as an excuse to say, no, we need fast internet, we'll get better. It's like a teenager saying, okay, you know what, I want a better computer. I'll do more. But it's not. He just wants to play games fast.
Absolutely. My brother, thank you for making time. I really enjoyed this conversation. That's Nrupesh Soni. He is a tech expert weighing in on a very topical subject of CRAN, the regulator, rejecting the application for Starlink to enter the Namibian market. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.